So in this lecture, we're going to look at counter-argument. In this class, that's something you're going to want to have in the argument essay and preferably in the research paper. A counter-argument is a good thing to have in any type of argumentative situation, whether it be an essay or a speech. Now, a good thing to kind of give you a foundation into what a counter-argument is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. If you have not read it, I would definitely recommend it. In it, he says, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle." So you see his point here is to know the opposition, right? And in any good argument situation, that's a good idea. Now, by definition, what this is when you examine an opponent's perspective. The purpose of it as an essay writer is to expand the appeal of your essay in order to appeal to people who have those positions, that are contrary to yours, and that may be directly contrary to yours, or even just somewhat contrary. This is your time and place in which you can try to bring them over to your side. That is the purpose of a counter-argument. It can go in one of two places, a counter-argument. Normally, as essays are assigned, you have your introduction, you have several argumentative body paragraphs, you would have a rebuttal, what they also call a counter-argument paragraph, before the conclusion, and then your conclusion would, of course, go last. That's your standard organization. Aristotle also recommends this specifically, though. He says that if we wait until the end to do the rebuttal, the last thing in our audience's mind is that alternate perspective, or maybe even the opposition's perspective, and he felt it better as a strategy to use the rebuttal earlier. To have your introduction, then your rebuttal, then state your argument or your case, and then finish with the conclusion. There are three basic types of counter-arguments. You can choose to refute, which means you're going to argue against something you just think is wrong. You can accommodate, which means to suggest that some part of your opposition's argument is very good and very valid, and you are going to adopt that as part of your argument because it is such a good point. And then the last thing you can do is quarantine. And when you quarantine, that's harder to prove, but you're essentially saying that the argument made here by the opposition is not relevant to the case you're making. When you compose a counter-argument, you want to think of it as a double-double, in that you have, think of that basic essay model. Your top bun is your topic sentence. You have that cheese, that's your first piece of evidence. You have your analysis. You have, that essentially is what you're going to do as far as analyzing the opponent's perspective. And then in the second half of this paragraph, you're going to put forth your own perspective or thoughts on the opposition's argument. It's kind of like this. This gives you a more academic look at it here. So you'd have a topic sentence that puts forth the opposition's point. It's more like a summary sentence, although topic sentences typically are not that. It is okay if your counter-argument, the topic sentence feels a little summary-ish. That's okay. You want to quote your opponent. You want to review their reasoning. This is also more like summary than it is like analysis. You're not doing analysis here. You are kind of restating their analysis, right? How did they reach these conclusions that you might find objectionable? Okay? And once we get to that point, we can start to the counter-argument part of this starts with step 4. There, at that point, you're essentially going to put forth a mini topic sentence that states your position on this, add evidence, add analysis, and with a concluding sentence. That's essentially your typical counter argument right there. There are many different strategies. You know, the one on this page is one. It is actually number 6 on this list. Supply additional evidence that supports an alternative perspective. But as you can see here, there are at least eight different types of counter arguments, or things that you could focus on in a counter argument. Anything from assumptions to premises, biases, contradictions, fallacies. So there are a lot of possibilities. Okay, good. All right. So that brings us to the end of counter argumentation. And remember, the purpose of the counter argument is to appeal to the audience that disagrees with you, right? How can you bring them over to your side and help them understand your position and agree with your position a little bit more?